Welcome, everybody, to this beautiful Thursday afternoon. I hope everybody's having a great summer. My name is Chris Adams, and I'm here with Mark and Michael here today. This is the Goose Digital webinar series. This is part four. And if you haven't seen the last few, they are live on the Goose Digital website and also through LinkedIn. I believe, Michael, they're on the Goose Digital LinkedIn page, I believe, too.
Yeah.
Perfect. Today we're talking about it's part of the whole series, and again, this one's a little bit more closer to the founders and business owners that are driving and scaling businesses, especially around this thing called the acquisition advantage and building the exit-ready marketing engine. So this topic pertains a lot in Mark's world, which is in the Angel Investors of Ontario world, where people are looking for investment dollars in order to grow and scale their organization. And typically that's when they have product market fit, and typically when they are going to be taking a dollar and they know they can potentially turn that into $5 or $10 using the best sales and marketing engine that they have available. And from the Goose Digital side, from Michael's side, this is what they specialize in, this concept of how do you build this engine. And we'll get into it today. And again, it's part art, it's part science. And I look forward to moderating and working us through over the next 45 minutes. I believe the attendees as well do have a chance to enter in any questions at any point in time through their questions or commenting. And we'll address any of those things near the end of the conversation here. So let's get moving, guys. Well, first of all, how are you feeling this summer? And why don't you introduce yourselves quickly as well, too?
Go ahead, Mark.
Sure. It's Mark Lawrence, Executive Chair of Angel Investors Ontario, engineer by training, and I used to be a sell-side analyst. So I looked at companies from deep dive due diligence all across technology sectors and talked to institutional investors. So what I'm saying is really applicable to institutional investors as you go up the food chain and start moving on. I also run an exempt market dealer, so I look at larger companies, but the whole ideas of what you're looking for stay the same between a startup and an advanced VC or private capital market transaction. Next to you, Michael.
Great. Michael Turksani, so founder and CEO of Goose Digital. We've been around this topic now, so this is our fourth one with you guys, and really excited about it. This one is unique because having both started Goose Digital over the last and running it for the last 11 years, but also sold and purchased companies, I really understand kind of the value of having the sales and marketing side of that conversation really nailed down. So yeah, that's me, and look forward to today.
It's awesome. All right, well, let's get started here, guys. I am very excited here. I'm assuming when we go into this, we're going to talk a little bit about the components, as you're seeing on the screen here, that you might need in order to be successful. And again, today we will probably lean a little bit on the B2B side. It doesn't mean that what we're talking about today wouldn't drive retail and or B2C customer acquisition as well. The math is a little bit different on both sides, and the strategy would be a little different. And then also the great part about some software companies and marketplaces is they get to market both on the B2C side and the B2B side. And I call that's the crazy part. And a lot of these crazy entrepreneurs that want to go down that road, that's definitely the toughest of toughest roads, because you're doing both things. And it's always easier when you can try to your software or your company is aligned to one side or the other. Maybe we can get to we'll go to the next slide here. And possibly I'm going to turn it over here to Michael here just to talk a little bit about the stack and some of these percentages.
Sure. So I think, and I'll let Mark go after me here just to hear from him on how you look at things, Mark. But I mean, the one kind of key point that I wanted to talk about at this stage was really how we're brought in as an agency many times for various businesses that are scaling up. And we're brought in fact, to help clean up the marketing stack. And why is that? It's often because there's been years of handoff of these platforms, whether they're the CRM and the marketing automation systems or the campaign systems, from one team to the next team to the next team, as an organization really tries to build a capability in marketing. So what that means when we're kind of looking to prepare for an exit, and I'll let Mark talk more about how he looks at it, is having kind of some level of consistency in those systems. The last thing we want to do is look under the hood and realize that, the thing is kind of littered with errors and it's not really doing the scoring that we want. It's not really giving us confidence that the numbers that we're seeing in the pipeline are even real or accurate, because this marketing stack hasn't been well maintained over time. So that's kind of the Goose Digital angle, where we do get brought in many times to sort of tidy everything up, and it's a big part of any well-run department is really having the tools and systems operating effectively. Mark, I'll let you.
Well, thanks, Michael. And off the top, I should warn you guys that Ontario Hydro is just giving me a brownout right now. So if I disappear, give me a few seconds. I'll be back in through my cell phone, but nothing personal if you see a black figure there for a second. So as I mentioned, I used to be a sell-side analyst, and everything in due diligence applies to all sorts of companies. And I had a top director and Minister of Economic Development ask me, what sort of due diligence do angels do? And I said, a complete due diligence. And in fact, doing due diligence on a small startup company is much more difficult than doing it with a VC or a publicly traded company, because you don't have access to a lot of historical records and detailed information. So I always like to see assumptions just from the start. That really helps me figure out what sort of value and what sort of credibility I can place on the story of management. And at the end of the day, I'm looking for a marketing machine, not a magician. I don't want just one single person founder saying, oh, I know where everything is, don't worry about it, I've got it, and et cetera, et cetera. I want a machine that anybody can turn on with history, of track record of all the audits and everything that's happening with your company. And I want to see the assumptions that are made from a bottom-up sales process, which then feeds the marketing and vice versa. Is you just don't say it's 10% of TAM and move on. I want to see what are the boots in the ground backed up by marketing and sales, the whole works. And then I can get into your head to see, do I believe it? Is it credible? Has he done it before? And so the biggest thing I would say for someone looking for funding or looking for an exit is to prepare for these things right from the day one. Because the last thing that you want is to say, I've got somebody with a check for $1 million, $2 million. I want to see your data room. And you say, yeah, great. Well, I need 30 days to get it done. I've had far too many deals fall apart because the check writer moves on to another deal and leaves the entrepreneur in the dust. So be prepared from day one. Design your systems with the robustness, the governance going forward. And that also means that if you're looking at your marketing stack on what I want to see, it's got to be running for 90 days. You can't just say, oh, we'll start auditing and keeping it going. So I think I've seen some real life situations. I want to give a few examples. I had one client who she kept on testing, monitoring the traffic, used Reddit, Quora for acquisition, social activity, had lots of subscribers, and didn't do much. It didn't spend a lot of time on it. But the problem was that the financials didn't correspond with that. And so that required me to help them out to get the financials in forward. And that's all it took to get it past the finish line for funding. So you don't need a big marketing department. You can use people like Goose Digital to assist it, but you don't need a complete person. It can be a fractional person to do it. And so then I have another example of a person who had everything in their head, and that was a bit of a problem because they were using Google Analytics, Meta campaigns, customer list, but there's no documented marketing plan, no documented assumption list. Um, Most important, said who runs the marketing if the founder gets run over, and there's no answer for there. So that was a big black hole. And so what I think really from a diligence point of view, ones that have achieved the best value is they have about 20 things prepared in their due diligence. And I think, Michael, you're going to talk about the exit list later and getting ready for it. But this changes the discussion when the investor or buyer is talking to the founder. It says, how much more can we put through this machine now? We've got all the stats, so let's change some of these assumptions. We put a few more bucks here, we put more feet on the ground over here. Then you're starting to say, okay, I see what you have, but now they can easily say, what can we do with this? Can we introduce our products into their chain? And it changes the acquisition conversation from risk mitigation to growth potential. And that's where you get the extra buck going forward. So I'm going to leave it there. There's a few other things, but I think it's really important is that you have to show that you've got all the steps in your business categorized from a founder's ideas to revenue, and really impose the strategy, the process, the people, technology, data, customers, and revenue, all documented, measurable at the same time. And this lets you get an acquisition going and a financing going, and you can't do an M&A transaction unless you can get some early financing, all applicable. So I'll turn it back to you, Chris.
Perfect. Yeah, this is great stuff. But I definitely believe that there's more to the acquisition and making yourself scalable. I think 10, 20 years ago, we could have just talked a little bit more about revenue and more about the tech and the product itself. And that could have actually got you in the door. I would say there's at least 30, 40+% on the scorecard right now to have the right sales and marketing stack, and also having it in order and having your data correct as well. And maybe the comment I would make, and I don't know if we're going to be talking about this, I believe we're talking about a little bit of AI in here in the future slides here, but you can't ask a digital agency like Goose to do AI workflows right now to save and do efficiencies when you might not have invested or have clean data. The first thing, and that's the sad part about it, the first thing that, a Goose Digital is going to say is, we have to do some due diligence. We're going to have to go into your CRM. We're going to have to fix a few things. We're going to have to clean things up. We've got to get your processes done correctly. Once we do all those things and retest all of your assumptions on product market fit and your audience types and your content towards those audience types, then once we see some progress in that zone, we can then turn the volume up on the ads and potentially the AI workflow that would occur thereafter. So let's talk a little bit now about, the goodwill, as I would call it, in the company. In which case, a lot of organizations I see have a founder that basically controls everything, and if that person was gone, a lot of things would fall apart. So let's talk about, work processes, operational processes. How do you guys define buyer ready in this context? And I'll bring it back over to Mark and Michael.
Yeah, if Michael, if I could put a good word in there. I had a recent client who was a great technologist. There was a small team, great technology, had a bunch of patents made, and he went and had a meeting with a strategic buyer without me being present. And he made the silly comment that, I don't care about IP because it costs me too much to protect it. That's when you get a founder who doesn't know when to make the break of getting someone else to take over business, instead of just keeping fingers and saying, I'm doing it, but he's doing it in a bad way, in fact, a detrimental way. So that's not only is it hurting the viability of the company, it may blow up before you even get a chance to get someone to do serious due diligence. So I'll turn it over to you
Yeah.
again. But
Yeah,
turning
I
those
mean, I
guys.
think I think that's a really good point on kind of getting an organization to be buyer ready, if you will, or even kind of like investment ready. I think we've already touched on it before. Just having someone that has all the institutional knowledge, and typically being the founder that starts off, that can kind of do the deals, and you don't really have a sense of where everything's coming from. Really, what we try to help with is really unpacking that into something that can be systematized, as you said. How can we put a value to the business by saying, well, actually, if I'm not here, we still get 10 leads a week, or we still get 5 leads a week, or whatever the numbers are, right? And my team is very comfortable closing roughly 20% of those to a meeting, and then we roughly get 25% of those closing to a deal, let's say. And I think that for us is really what we're talking about right now, is moving to a world where the marketing side of the equation isn't tied up in the founder's head. And a lot of the founders, myself included, they have a vision and they can sell and they can kind of communicate a certain way. But as you start to go down into a marketing exercise and then a subsequent sales exercise, that breaks down quickly. So I think you would know better, Mark. You sort of said running these things for at least 90 days, but I think it just really is about picking up on what Chris said. Aligning all those elements. If you're going after a construction audience and that's what you have a solution to sell to, then you've unpacked those audiences, those personas, you've got some content around it. You can kind of show that we're picking up some leads. What do we do when we get a lead? Well, we have these types of meetings. It moves through our CRM a certain way. We can all have a sales meeting and talk about it. And then we're starting to see deals come out the other end. So it's not complicated. It's just something that is more of a professional process that you need to work through.
More an organizational capacity versus a founder capacity. Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know where I heard this before in my life, but it has proven to be true over and over again. But the saying is every time you double your revenue in a business, you break 50% of your internal workflow processes.
Wow.
And that's because you add more people to your team, or you add a new piece of technology, or you're expanding to potentially you're exporting or doing things in the States versus Canada. So all of these things start to add up. And again, change happens. So therefore, either you're diligent on a quarterly basis to adjust course on all that stuff, or every year you're surprised why things aren't working. And you then wake up the next day and start working on it again to fix those processes. Or you're the type of person that just doesn't care, possibly concentrates on sales, which is totally cool. But you have to be aware that you're going to have, I wouldn't call it technical debt, but you're going to have some sort of workflow debt. I don't know if we've got a name for that, Michael, but we can create one today if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I think workflow debt's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. And Chris, I believe that one of the most important things I look at from diligence is just how coachable is the founder as well. Does he take opinion right? Does he know he's not the CEO from the long term, or maybe he's just going to be the marketing guy? But if founders are very defensive from day one, that's usually a bad sign from my experience. So you should be, as an entrepreneur, trying to surround you with lots of very smart people, in fact, smarter than you. That's not a denigration of your capacity, but it's a good business practice and attracts other people to come to your organization as well.
Absolutely. All right, let's move to this next slide here. All right, my favorite, the exit. And this is an interesting part. I think in my experience, even getting some interest in an exit should be celebrated, because not everybody will get this moment in time in a business. They either will run it forever, or potentially some businesses fail over a period of time. But having this exit is an incredible thing. And I like the idea of an exit readiness, and just past tense. when my co-founder and I were running a couple of different software companies. I was CTO and she was more on the business operations side. Her her stance was, I'm going to make the financials and everything really great. Like it's going to look like when you look at it, people are going to be, this is awesome. And then from my perspective, I had to do the due diligence on the tech side, which is like, okay, if I have to be audited by 5 different engineers from California, I better pass that test. And that means, I can't have open source code. I got to have all my I's dotted and T's crossed. My API layer better be very high quality, market standards. I better have all my terms and services. I better have a SOC compliance checklist done and penetration testing done. So there was a lot of things on the tech side that I would be doing and preparing for the potential opportunity of an exit. And my co-founder was working on the other side of the fence. And so I think maybe I'll pass it to, when we go to the next slide, I'll pass it to you, Mark and Michael, to comment on potentially we're probably concentrating here on the other side of the fence, which is marketing and sales and operations and finance. And maybe you want to comment on those things.
Sure. I mean, why don't I start this time, Mark, and then I'll let you go next. So, you already touched on it. I think the standardized documentation. So, not having, everything be in the head. I think for me and reflecting on, you kind of reflected on the sales side of it or the exit side of it. I reflect a little bit on the acquisition side of it. So having made an acquisition about actually coming up on 2 years ago in October, we bought an agency and brought them in to our team, and we went through that whole process. And one of the things that we looked at was actually, okay, how are all the things that you do are not the same that we do from a go-to-market perspective, from a sales, from an operations perspective, recognizing that this, obviously we're talking a lot about the sales and marketing. What do you have for us, right? Like, what do you have in terms of how you guys do things? Luckily, there was a lot of that was nailed down. And then on the transferable MarTech, they actually were further ahead than I think probably a lot of other agencies in terms of how they structured their MarTech stack. And they had, proper documentation, proper setups of reseller accounts. All of their customers were well implemented from a stack perspective. So us being able to take that over and then learn that technology, because they were on different MarTech than we had. We actually adopted some of the things that they were doing, and they adopted some of the things that we were doing. So, I think that's a really good example of when you're not only kind of packaging up to sell. In this case, the people that we acquired were packaging up to sell. We were able to clearly see this. And to your point, Mark, it wasn't, let's get back to you in 30 days. The other thing I would say is that on the pipeline and the campaigning, that was actually really important, with having like a future sales pipeline, because as you can imagine, if you were to snapshot in time, your business has a sales pipeline that's probably going to close, right? So being able to look at that from an acquisition point of view and say, well, part of the sale value here is going to come from if we continue to close 35% or 25% of this pipeline, which is already in motion, we want that to be part of our earnout, right? And we were able to structure all that in because we had the named accounts and all the visibility.
Yeah. So what I would say from my point of view is, when you run a business and start a business and you're looking for funding initially, you should always be prepared for the idea that you may find an acquisition candidate, because sometimes you're talking to strategic investors and it may be that they're really interested in owning part of you or taking a large position. Now, there's strategic issues. You don't want to scare away potential competitors and et cetera, et cetera. But I've always, from an exempt market dealer perspective, I always say that I get compensated if I find you funding or a strategic buyer, because I want to present everything to you that you see there. And all of this checklist and integrable elements are important. A guy I used to look up to at GIAC Computers, Steve Sadler, made thousands of acquisitions. He's made thousands of them at Enghouse Computers. His plan was that before you close the books and close the deal, you have a 6-week integration plan and it's done. If it takes longer than 6 weeks to integrate an acquisition, then you don't know it, and it's not going to be a benefit, and you're not going to get the full value. So I always like that theory. Be ready that you can deliver a go-to plan in 6 weeks and how we could be integrated and say all those things. So those are sort of the practical aspects of how I look at the application and how you transfer a MarTech plan, technology plan. And the other thing I would say for the entrepreneurs is have your financials ready, because they tell you how you've been spending my money in the past, but more so how you're going to be my steward of my money going forward. And if they said they've got the great marketing plan, et cetera, but I see that the only $10,000 has been spent to market in the last 24 months, there's a disconnect. So, and maybe they thought they could get it by me or something like this, but your financials have to back up what you said you've done. Otherwise, we're going to see through it later on. Back to you, Chris.
Great.
I agree with all those things. Yes. All right, let's move to the next slide here. All right, so let's go a little bit deeper here on the marketing side then, and we're going to be looking at kind of like the value of your brand and maybe some KPIs, Michael, around how you would define that.
Yeah, I have a few. So, sorry, okay. Chris.
No, and also dip into number 4, pillar 4 as well, if you could as well on the market and the revenue generating side of things.
So I got an interesting anecdote, and I got a few other KPIs to sort of throw on the table here. So for pillar 3, really, what does this sort of like mean in terms of a brand that you're buying? And a lot of times you are, as an acquirer, you're looking at revenue, you're looking at margins, Mark, like obviously there's, how is the business selling, et cetera, et cetera. But we're also buying the brand, right? If the brand is a mess, if it's got toxic backlinks, we're throwing out some technical terms here. If it's got problems on the internet, it's got terrible reviews, that is something that we need to be aware of, and that, might be a problem for us. Equally, you can have this asset essentially created where our marketing is strong. And we had this scenario, this anecdote I'm going to bring up. We were a much smaller company in my past business that was acquired by a systems integrator out of London, England. And they actually did the reverse. They bought us as a much smaller organization, and they took our brand, because at the time they were buying 3 different subsidiaries, including their own brand, which was a little bit more professional services oriented. Ours was a little bit more tech. And the other tech firms that they had bought didn't have the succinct brand and all the pieces that they thought they could use. So actually it was very strange for us, but we kind of became the global brand. And I think a lot of that came down to some of these pieces where we could put a value on it, and they certainly saw that value. On the marketing as an asset, there is, we were looking at acquiring another agency. And one of the things that came up in that discussion was the value of their existing marketing engine. And you couldn't really dispute it. They were kind of slowly growing over time, but they had a very well established approach to creating leads, running a process. There was a little bit too much founder stuff that we talked about earlier in the webinar that I think got in the way of us being able to really do that deal. But ultimately, on my camera might be, sorry guys. Can you hear me?
We can see you and hear you.
Okay, great.
Keep on going.
And that got in the way, but more or less where I was going with it was that there was a ton of value on that particular asset because of the consistency in revenue generation. So from a KPI perspective, some of the things that we help organizations nail down is, the return on ad spend, what would we really put into return on ad spend, the cost per lead, the cost to acquire a deal, things like your for every dollar of marketing program, what are we driving in terms of revenue? Those are some things that we help organizations pull together, because oftentimes they don't have all those pieces nailed down. Mark, Perfect. I'll turn that over to you.
Yeah, I think that brand is a very important thing, and I think sometimes it's good to have a third party also mention, boy, there's a lot of competing companies with the same name in another jurisdiction. Very simple things. You got the same website name, et cetera, but they're gung ho pushing down that way, and sometimes I've backed away because I just know, why are we spending so much money on a brand which they can't protect versus some other people with the same name in the marketplace. And it's
Hmm.
simple things like that, but we see it as well. And I think
Yep.
entrepreneurs should be reasonable in discussing what are the alternatives before you spend a lot more to move forward.
100%. Jen, if I could comment on that, and also it's okay to pivot as well. So, for example, you may have chosen a name at the beginning of time, but maybe after a couple of years, you figured that that name might not actually be reasonable, and you need to pivot
Hmm.
to a new one. It's good to have that discussion earlier than later because you do have to invest in a whole new brand. I am part of IP Ontario, so I'm one of 40 coaches in Ontario under Doug Ford's IPON kind of group. We talk about trademarks and patenting all the time. I'll just quickly add on this checklist. You should have a patent, especially if you're a technology company. It's got to be a needle in a haystack of something. And it doesn't mean that you're going to go and fight someone in court over something. It really just means that you have something intelligent. There is some sort of method or patented method on what you're doing. It adds the check boxes on the sales and marketing side. If I'm calling someone and I say, "Hey, I've got this patented software platform," it sounds a lot better than not saying that. And in your marketing, the exact same way, and potentially on an exit, people that are acquiring always like to have IP. And from a trademark perspective, a lot of people fail to sort of say, "Oh, well, I registered my company in Ontario or Canada, therefore it's protected." Well, not really. So you need to trademark that name in Canada. And then afterwards, you should then trademark that name in the US as well, because as Mark just said, there could be another individual operating, and it's better to find out sooner than later if that is
Hmm.
going to be an issue because you can switch and you can invest into a different brand. And if you get caught and it's too late, you might have already spent $50,000 or $100,000 and went down the wrong road. And I've seen that many, many times. So please, for everybody that's attending here today, trademarks are your best friend. All
Yeah,
right, let's move. Yeah,
yeah, go
go
ahead.
on. No, I was just going to move to the next slide, Mark, but please comment on that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've done a lot of trademarking different properties, the URLs and stuff in Canada and US, and it's still not 100% because it's hard to identify where the jurisdictions are that people using or infringing upon my trademark are domiciled and where they're trying to get business. But at least if you do it, you've got some leg up and some argument to tell them it's cease and desist versus them having a free reign with you.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I don't think that like having, again, a patent and or the trademark in your back pocket is obviously very good because it's a safety thing. But I truly believe in the capitalist market. And you better, I don't care if you got the trademark, you better be the best damn marketer for that brand and producing the KPIs and getting all your followers on Instagram and X and LinkedIn and everywhere and dominate, like crush the top 20 search results for the terms that you want. And if you're not doing that, you suck. And you're just allowing your competitor in the door. And that is your fault, not the competitor's fault. And again, I might be a little aggressive in that area, but that's just my take on it.
Great.
Yeah, and the final thing I might say is for those entrepreneurs that have worked with our great innovation institutions, colleges, and universities, which IPON and others work with as well. Understand how the royalties go back to the innovation centers and those. It's different with every university, and don't assume that the investor or the purchaser of your company will understand what it is because there's 10 different versions in Canada, and you have to say what it is and articulate it. And that can be a difference of 2% royalty, 10% royalty, and that all should be part of your marketing plan as to how you market the profit center of your company as well to the buyers.
I like it. All right, so we're getting close to the end here for the attendees. We have another 10 minutes. We're going to get into the conclusion area and next steps. And while we're getting in here, maybe I'll tee it up a little bit and just comment on a couple of things that I've seen in the marketplace. And then maybe Mark and Michael, again, please comment on that. And then also get into our next steps here on these pillars here. So what I've seen just recently, big company, Airtable, obviously the darling of Silicon Valley. We're talking probably plus $1 billion more in revenue and growing at a significant 20-30% growth rate, which I think, Mark, from your perspective, that from an angel group, you'd be going, this is exactly what we want to see. Even if you were only doing $100,000 or $1 million, you'd be like, yeah, you're on the right track. Normally, 10 years ago, we would have given them a 10x-ish, if we were writing a check at an angel group, we would give them 10x on their revenue and their based on their growth rates and things of that nature. They were sold just recently for 2.8x. And that's an interesting stat. I think that has some ripples and ramifications in the VC and the angel world. And that also stacks up with how AI has affected valuations and also affected people providing or putting money into new startups in the software space. And I think maybe you two can comment on this, but I personally believe that AI has caused some sort of disruption in what we could look at from a valuation standpoint. And I know that we're talking a little bit about, again, nothing that we're going to say today, all these things that we talked about, you got to do no matter what to get the exit or get a proper valuation. But there is the wind, I always like using sailing analogies, but, the wind has changed on the course and we need to readjust our sails and we need to sort of look at what the new race is looking like. And so Mark and Michael, if you wanted to comment on what you're feeling in this space, plus comment on the slide as well, would be great.
I'd like to just add that I think entrepreneurs these days should be very careful how they use AI in their company name or their first page moniker, like AI powered, we're an AI powered company or something like this. Every company is going to be AI powered. And when I'd say 4 out of 5 people, if I go down and say, well, what data are you using? What model are you using, et cetera? They can't answer it. And so, your life science company, and we use AI to enhance results, and we're going to have more data we can enhance. But you're doing yourself a disservice if you keep on using AI as a first moniker in doing it, because you better back it up right away of why you are actually a true AI company instead of just using a few applications adjusted for it. So I think that does change the valuation that people are looking at, and because investors want to understand what's in the black box, and if too much is being done in AI, then they start to wonder, what do I value for this, and what are they actually doing in the AI model?
Yes.
Yeah, my take on that, I think there's a few things in there, Chris. A lot of what we're driving at here, and in some ways, the whole series has been around certainty, which is sort of what we have as one of the last kind of takeaways here, right? How do we give investors or acquire kind of certainty that what we're selling them is something that they can continue to gain reward off of over time, right? And I think the AI is created a level of uncertainty, certainly in certain tech spaces that you guys are in and that we have as customers, where there's uncertainty around the license model, and is it as sticky as we thought it was, and our SaaS ecosystem, as we all know, has gone and just exploded over the last 13 years to these these I can't remember how many SaaS. There's that one guy that tracks all the SaaS apps, but there's just a million of them now, right? And so I think that, that's kind of now really calling into question the value prop. Like we thought we had a great piece of technology. We thought it was solving a need, and indeed it was. But can AI kind of just go in there and solve 80% of the need and it's good enough? And now people are kind of writing their own versions of the solution that we have, for example. So I think that's definitely a concern. But I remember looking at raising some money quite a while ago before we ended up selling our last firm. And one of the comments that we got from our lawyer, who we were just getting some advice on, it was that, like, it sounds like you guys don't really need to raise a lot of money. It sounds like you need, $20,000 more a month in order to fund various resources to kind of go do your sales and marketing, right? And it kind of stuck with me, as over time. And it's like, well, actually, when we look at these things, getting away from the founder, having level of systems in place, like the pre-work mark that you want to see, so they're not, taking 90 days to do it when they need something or when they get an offer, right? That these systems are actually have been in place and running. All that really, to me, is a really great business. And unfortunately, marketing is challenging. It's a hard thing. I feel like if we were all super great at marketing, we would have $100 million businesses all over the place. It's a tough thing to do, and to do it well and to do it affordably. But the point is that selling or raising or just running your company, these are all really great things that build that certainty, that build good quality workflows, that give you that preparation that if and when you want to do something, it's there. And I don't think it's overhead. I actually think it's just a good business.
So,
Yes.
Michael, if I could add a few things, that just resources. I know that Goose Digital has a lot of good resources on your website and your personnel.
Please.
There's a couple of other sources I might direct our viewers to, is the AIO, Angel Investors Ontario, angelinvestorsontario.ca website. We've got something like Knowledge Hub, and we've got about 80 different things on there, investor readiness, and we cover a whole bunch of different topics and through the different programs. I also suggest that you should try, as an entrepreneur, get rated by pitch score. It's sort of a heat map of how you're perceived by pitches, and do it before you make your first pitch for an M&A target or that, and get some feedback. And perhaps also get yourself on Dealum, deal software that gives some of the information, and then it can be syndicated your sales going forward. But there's two resources I like. I like a BDC book called Business Transfer, Selling Your Business. It's a great resource. And a second BDC, Business Development Bank of Canada, called the Due Diligence Guide. And that puts you in the view, really in the mind of the buyer or the investor, and gives you some of the background. But there's also a book which was published in 2012 by a fellow named John Warrillow, Warrillou, called Built to Sell. You can get it on Amazon for about $22, and it's a really good practical guide. And there's lots of books out there, but that's one I've liked and suggest people should pick it up as well.
Those are all great resources for sure. And just commenting on M&A just in general before we get to this end and conclusion. Not everything is a done deal, even if there's some signed LOIs and some signed when the lawyers say, hey, we're gonna do this deal on October 31st, it's gonna be done for that end of third quarter. Everything always goes sideways. Everything always takes longer. It might take 1 month more, 3 months more. There might be another renegotiation. I have seen a number of founders in my time start to celebrate or party, and they forget to run their own business. And then when something happens, like the M&A thing doesn't come together, they've lost 6 months of sales and marketing because they haven't followed the same processes. They just thought they were going to get bought out, and all of a sudden they're not. And then now there's a cash crunch because they have forgotten to actually keep the engine moving along. So there are pitfalls from a human perspective. What I've also learned recently too, through an insurance company, you can buy a M&A insurance in this process as well, and someone will actually subscribe this to you. And if your deal falls apart, your insurance policy will kick in. And again, I don't know the exact details on what that would cost and how you would engage, but there's a gentleman at Bevan Insurance that they're coming to the Reignite conference in September, where all of you, Mark and Michael, are going to be, and maybe that's something that you can bring up with those group of people just to talk about how M&A works with your bank and your business.
Great idea.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. This is again. I love these subject. I love the subject matter, and the last three parts of this series. I was grateful to have Michael and Kevin and Chris from Goose Digital on my sailboat a couple weeks ago for an episode of Sailing and Scaling. If you wanted to go online at Goose, and you can see us on the sailboat talking about AI in workflows with sales and marketing and future predictions and trends. A little bit more geeky than today. That's always a fun topic. And Mark and Michael, again, it's so easy to talk with you guys and be a part of a panel. And again, I look forward to about 30 days to seeing you in person.
Great.
Well, thanks.
Yeah,
Chris.
you're welcome, guys. And just a call out here. If you guys go to goosedigital.com/founders-series, we do have all of 4 of these things that we did together are up on a single page. So I'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of that link that registered for this, just so you can go back and, watch the parts that you want to watch or pick up on some of the written content that we built off of this as well.
And thank you, Michael, and thank you, Chris. And Michael, I've had a chance to meet a lot of your colleagues there, and they all are very knowledgeable and have added to our discussions over the last previous 3 discussions. So thank you for having them on as well in the past. It's been